Bitcoin, SEOUL.org, the Asian Whale Club for active Bitcoin investors with over 50 Bitcoin in play. We help you manage your Bitcoin and grow it. Okay, why is it that when Bitcoin's on a tear, it's actually going long, right? It's going up super fast. You can just see it going up. You're like, oh, this is fantastic. I'm going to buy Bitcoin. You buy it, you start FOMOing, and the moment you buy it, it goes up a little bit and then it goes boof. Why is that? Is it because someone's like, hey, Bitcoin's going up, I'd better not make any money, I'd better sell all my Bitcoin and just go back to the monastery? Is that what's going on? Actually, no. I'll tell you what's happening. That is called, and thanks to a couple buddies of mine on this terminology, I keep using the wrong words here, but it's a short push. It's a short push. What ends up happening is people that thought that Bitcoin would go down, they short Bitcoin. And what shorting Bitcoin is, it's short because you step into the market and you say, hey, I want to buy Bitcoin. And you take, let's say you have one Bitcoin that you enter the market with, and you give that as collateral to the exchange, and the exchange says, okay, how many Bitcoin do you want? And you say, I want 100 Bitcoin. They'll give it to you. They will take your 1 Bitcoin and they'll give you 100 Bitcoin. Why? Because they still control it. And you short it. So what does short mean? That means that you have your time, your contact time with that Bitcoin is super short. The moment you buy it, you sell it. But you still own the contract for 100 Bitcoin. Do you see what I'm saying? So you got 100 Bitcoin, but you no longer have that 100 Bitcoin. And instead what you have is money worth the equivalent of that 100 Bitcoin. So you've got this cash and you're like, yes, I have a ton of cash. So when Bitcoin goes down, I can use the same amount of cash. And since Bitcoin's cost is going down, what you're doing is you're using the same amount of money to buy this amount of Bitcoin. So what happens? You have this much money left over, and over here, this much money left over. You have this much cash left over that you can just put in your pocket. And that's what shorting does. Now, what happens if it goes the other way? What happens if you've got all this Bitcoin, and the moment you bought it, you quickly sold it so that your contact time with that Bitcoin is super short. You sold it, now you got cash, and you own only 1% equity of that stash of Bitcoin that you just sold. Because remember, you gave that 1%, that 1 Bitcoin for that 100 Bitcoin as collateral. And let's say Bitcoin goes up in value. Now what happens? If Bitcoin goes up 1% in value, your collateral is not enough to cover the difference. So now, let's say 1 Bitcoin cost $1, because it did at one point, and for math's sake, it's easy. So let's say 1 Bitcoin cost $100, you borrowed 100 Bitcoin, and it went up 1%. So how much money is it worth now? How much money would it cost to buy back that Bitcoin and give it back to the exchange, which is like a bank, give it back to the exchange, and have the Bitcoin transaction complete? You borrowed 100 Bitcoin, you gave back 100 Bitcoin. Well, if it went up 1% and you borrowed 100 Bitcoin at $1 each, now it's worth $101. You have to pay $101 to buy that exact same Bitcoin back, right? Guess where that $101 comes from? Well, the $100 comes from the amount of Bitcoin that you borrowed. Guess where that $1 comes from? That $1 comes from the 1 Bitcoin you gave the exchange as collateral. Your collateral goes up in smoke. Poof, it's gone. That is what happens just before a short push. What is a short push? Well, let's say the bank or the exchange says, okay, well, you can't afford to cover this $101 worth of Bitcoin, so we're going to take your money and we're just going to take your Bitcoin back. Thank you. We're going to put the Bitcoin back on the shelves for someone else to borrow. No, that's not how it works. That's not what happens. Why not? What they do is they sell it. So if you borrowed 100 Bitcoin, the moment you give that Bitcoin back to the exchange, they don't just give it to somebody else, they sell it. Why would they? They sell it because it's just like a bank. That's exactly what a bank does. Think about it. You borrow money from a bank, and suddenly you can't make your mortgage payments. You can't make your rent payments, or actually it's mortgage payments. And you're 3 months behind, and then you're 6 months behind. They kick you out, and what do? Hey, party house. Let's go do a barbecue in the backyard, and let's go beach camping out in front of the front yard. And no. They don't give the keys to the house that they took away from you to their executives or their sales associates or their bank tellers. What do? They put the house up for auction and they just sell it. Why? Because it's easier to liquidate it and then just give that money to somebody else. They're not in the business of giving people houses. They're not in the business of managing keys and properties. They're in the business of just giving people loans on cash. That's exactly the same thing a exchange does. When you borrow Bitcoin from a exchange, you're not borrowing Bitcoin. What you're doing is borrowing money. And the easiest way for them to keep track of all that, the moment you give it back, because you can't afford the price increase, remember Bitcoin's going up, they sell the hell out of it. And somebody else, you just bought it here, and you're like, yes, I made 3%. Guess what? Somebody else lost 100%. Boof. And it drops down. Is that a bad thing? Actually, it's a great thing. It's a great thing because the moment it gets liquidated, more people come in, just swarm and just chew that sucker up. They just swallow it right up. And that creates this upward momentum, creates this upward push where you bought it here, it dropped down here, more people jump in, and more people start pushing you up with them because you're first in line. But the only time that's bad is if you didn't give yourself enough leeway, if you didn't give yourself enough margin. And let's say you were betting on, hey, if the price of Bitcoin falls 1%, I'm liquidated. Then you're screwed because the price of Bitcoin will fall 3, 4, 5% if there's a huge multi-million-dollar order that just gets poof, liquidated. Because these things have to happen when Bitcoin goes long and someone else goes short to return money back to the exchange. Does that make sense? Did I cover it all? Okay, so don't feel bad and always give yourself, oh, so what I did was, here, Bitcoin went up so fast, I'm counting on somebody's, and you can look at the orders. Here are the orders. Somebody's time limit expires or someone's short gets liquidated, and there's a short push all the way back down to one of these lines. So I've got two lines where I think I'm going to catch Bitcoin on the retrace, on the short push, and another line where I absolutely have to buy more Bitcoin because it's the opposite of a short squeeze. Because that's my liquidation price. So I buy more Bitcoin to lower my liquidation price just in case some huge whale with a $10 million Bitcoin order gets liquidated. Does that make sense? If it doesn't make sense, ask me questions in our contact form at bitcoinsoul.org. bitcoinsoul.org, and I will attempt to make another video if whatever questions are most common. We pick those questions, we make videos with the answers to those questions. And again, if you have over 50 Bitcoin that you're actively managing and you want help, you want us to grow it for you and protect it during downturns like the one we just had, contact us. That's what we